In the tutorial of Modern Warfare, you move forward, targets pop up, you shoot them down, and you move forward. It's a logical sort of progress that's been standard since the dawn of the FPS. In the rest of the game, you move forward, enemies pop up and shoot at you, you shoot them, they pop back up, you shoot them again, they pop up again, and eventually you realize that you're supposed to run straight into their line of fire in order to stop them from shooting at you. The best way to beat all difficulty levels in Modern Warfare is to run past the people who are shooting you to death. They live forever if they're in front of you, and they disappear if they're behind you. Nowhere in the game's world is this mentioned or explained. In other shooters, running into the line of fire would get you killed. It would be a stupid move that would drain your health. Maybe you'd do the occasional bum rush, but not as a viable method of progress. That's why Modern Warfare has regenerating health. Regenerating health, introduced to the series by Call of Duty 2, allows developers to skip large amounts of playtesting by ignoring health pack placement, instead turning death into a more immediate threat, but not a long-term consequence. The layout of a level becomes simplified down to areas that have too many respawning enemies and are deadly, and areas that are possible to run through. Since those areas are very easy to create and delineate, the designers gain perfect control over the way players move through the levels, which results in something far more controlling than normal linear map design. Good linear progression in a shooter is actually a string of strategic playgrounds for the player and the AI, where different weapons, routes, and skill levels will lead to different results. Regenerating health has its use as well. Released at the same time as Call of Duty 2, Michel Ancel's King Kong video game used regenerating health as a way of removing the heads-up display and giving dinosaurs the immediacy they deserved. In the context of an encounter with a Tyrannosaur's jaws, it makes sense that you either die quickly or don't die at all. And theoretically, even infinitely respawning enemies could have a context or meaning in a game, rather than being an illogical nuisance that developers expect you to ignore. The problem is the way that each of these elements are used in an attempt to cover the others up. It's the way that they combine in order to take all freedom from the player. In-game dialogue, instructions, and indications explicitly encourage goals and strategies which are impossible due to these elements. Call of Duty games don't let the player choose anything and don't let the player know what has been chosen for them. They lie to the player at every turn.
Remember what I taught you. Keep in mind variable humidity and wind speed along the body's flight path. At this distance, you'll also have to take the Coriolis effect into account. I think I see him. Wait, he went wide. Target down. I think you blew off his arm.
After widespread complaints about the infinite respawns in Modern Warfare, Jason West and Robert Bowling promised that Modern Warfare 2 wouldn't have them. For the most part, they followed through on their promises, making it the only structurally sound Call of Duty ever made. A year later, Jason West was fired by Activision, along with the CEO of Infinity Ward, and half of the studio resigned and are all now in legal battles against Activision for their withheld paychecks. Modern Warfare 3 went back to the same broken game design as Modern Warfare, and Robert Bowling resigned shortly after. Games like Homefront and Crysis 2 have attempted to emulate the wild financial success of Modern Warfare and its sequels by emulating its game design and aesthetics. But what developers don't realize when they try to copy Call of Duty is that it was a major market disruption in two ways. First, after a long period of shooters that were set only during World War II, it had a fresh setting. Second, released a year after Nintendo's Wii console, it was a first-person shooter that appealed to the casual gamer. Casual games are marked by their inconsequence. They can be played in short bursts, and their multiplayer provides a rigged competition to allow good and bad players to feel like they're capable of winning. Regenerating health means that as long as a bad player can reach cover, they don't suffer any consequences. Kill streaks ensure that with a bit of luck, players are awarded multiple skill-free kills. Death streaks, introduced in Modern Warfare 2, even reward players for dying. This is no different from spinning out and getting a compensatory blue shell in Mario Kart. The mass appeal of Call of Duty isn't that it's a hardcore, fast-paced shooter, it's that it looks like one. Current releases in the franchise are selling on brand momentum alone. Companies aren't making Call of Duty clones and making profits, they're ripping it off because they're confused. The same thing occurred far more obviously in the console market when the Wii and DS started selling to old people and little girls. So why isn't it obvious that Call of Duty is a casual game? Why does anyone other than the casual gamer assume that it has strategy, depth, or real challenge? Because they're not accustomed to discerning when a game is claiming or demanding a position of distinction of merit, or making an extravagant outward show. Forget for a moment how broken the game is. From the famous quotes that fade on screen whenever you die, to the titles of the chapters and the feigned political commentary, to the way that it wants to say, "War is hell," right after saying, "War, fuck yeah." Not only does no moment in a Call of Duty game come close to how horrific war is, but it doesn't even approach how fun other games have made it. Each Call of Duty is a string of lies, a well-maintained facade with nothing but emptiness behind. It's the most degenerate form of propaganda, which eschews artistic as well as factual merit. Modern Western society is able to look back on a Nazi documentary like Triumph of the Will and recognize the beauty it showed and the sensitivity to human life. Future societies will remember games like Call of Duty as a bad headache.